Hey down everybody, ABC Action News Chief Meteorologist Dennis Phillips. Want to take a little bit of time to talk about what's going on for the Northeast later Friday into Saturday. Lee will be a hurricane. It will be transitioning into a non-tropical system, think nor'easter, on Saturday and Sunday. But there's a little bit of confusion I think I'm hearing out there. So when you think about a hurricane coming into any area, you're most concerned with two things. One, with surge, water increase, which I still think will be an issue with this system in some areas. But the wind is also obviously a big issue. And usually with most hurricanes, in fact, all hurricanes, the strongest winds are right around the center. It's known as the eye wall, right? That's where the heaviest winds are. Usually they don't extend more than 5, 10, 15 miles out from the center. That's where the most of the winds occur. This will be transitioning into more of a winter type storm, a nor'easter, because it's going to be going over a lot of cold water and slowing down as it does so. What typically happens with these kind of systems, as is the case with the nor'easter, the winds expand in terms of distance. So you don't have as much heavy wind near the center. What you have is a much wider, a much broader wind field that could easily cover a couple hundred miles, maybe even a little bit more than that. Now, the winds will not be as strong as they are during a hurricane, but there's still going to be some very windy conditions. So right now, there's two lines of thinking. And by the way, the European model has been skewing a little bit more offshore, like the GFS over the last couple of runs. But at the end of the day, exact location isn't quite as important with this kind of a storm because you're pretty much just going to have a very broad wind field. So what does that mean? What are you expecting for the Northeast, for coastal New England, even for eastern Long Island? The way I see it right now, coastal New England will have tropical storm force winds, 55 to 65, gusts to hurricane force. All right. If it takes the shorter route, goes more on the westerly track, it'll have a little less time to fizzle a bit, so the winds could be a bit stronger. But I do not expect sustained hurricane force winds over almost all of the United States. All right. There will be tropical storm force winds. There will be gusts up to 65, 70, maybe even higher. And there's going to be a lot of rain and there will be coastal flooding. So again, think strong nor'easter minus all the cold water and the cold air. Now, if this track were to go a little more to the west, then maybe some of those winds would make it as far to the west as eastern Long Island. But inland areas, you're going to get some wind, but I think more than anything, you're just going to have a pretty heavy rain event. So again, coastal areas, especially say in the Cape Cod area, in the Bay, where the winds come in out of the north, which they will be after it passes, then you're going to get some water pushed in and there could be certainly some surge and some coastal flooding. But this is not like a traditional hurricane. So I would say if you're watching up north, if you live in an area that floods when you get a nor'easter, you'll probably see some flooding with this. Big difference though. Nor'easters are usually accelerating very quickly as they go off toward the northeast. This particular one could very well be slowing down a little bit. It all depends on whether a jet actually picks it up or misses it and then it kind of slows down a bit. But bottom line, here's what I'm saying. Tropical storm force winds for all of coastal New England, really from eastern Long Island eastward right up to Maine. All right. Inland areas will still get wind because again, this tropical storm force winds will probably extend a couple hundred miles out from the center. Now, if it stays 150 miles offshore, then do the math. 50 miles in, there's going to be some tropical storm force winds, 39 to 50, 55 miles an hour. That means there will be some power outages, sure. There's going to be some flooding. Yeah, there will be some surge in areas where that water is facing. But overall, this is not going to be a devastating system in a broad scale. There will be localized areas that are going to get water and some power outages and whatnot. But based on the current track, that's the way I'm seeing it. And the Hurricane Center continues to keep this offshore. That's another thing. The Hurricane Center continues to bring this onshore in Nova Scotia. So you keep this far offshore, again, the wind field is larger, just not stronger, and a weakening system moving into colder water should limit the threat to the northeast. Is it going to be nasty? Yes. Just like any nor'easter, where there's power outages, and there's flooding, and there's some surge, and there's some coastal issues. Those will be a thing, especially in extreme eastern sections from Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, all the way up to Maine. But don't expect this to be another Sandy. And that's just the one thing I'm trying to stress because a lot of people have been asking me that. We'll have an update tonight live at 7:30 on Dennis Phillips Live, and we'll be updating, as always, the Bay Area. There's another thing way out there in the Atlantic. Looks like that'll eventually curve down the road. So while the tropics are active, the threat to Florida, at least for the time being, is rather low. And we'll be on it, as always, 24/7. You guys have a great night.